Whoa, I just finished reading 30 pages, but I can't remember everything I read. Does that ever happen to you? If so, it's fine. It's very common, but you do need to work on it. And there are ways you can do that. And the best way to do it is to find a reading strategy that helps you to read more actively. Active reading just means that you are paying attention to the things that go into your mind while you're reading. It's like you're paying attention to your thoughts. You're paying attention to your thinking while you're reading. So one way you can do that, there's lots of ways, but one way is by annotating the text. What does annotating mean? That. Have you ever seen that when somebody writes in their book? Do you know how to do that? Do you know what they're writing? I remember feeling confused about that one time when I was really young and my mom was taking a college class and she was studying at home with a big book, writing, highlighting, circling. I said, "What are you doing? How do you even know what to write down?" And she just said, "This will help me when I take my test." I said, "Oh my gosh." And then when I got to college, I realized same thing happened to me. I had to read so much information that I had to find a way to get through it faster and more efficiently. So I learned about active reading. And active reading is many different strategies. This is one, annotating. So when you annotate, you're writing in your book and you're writing down the thoughts that you have in your mind about what you're reading. Okay? And the point of doing this is so that you understand what you're reading better. And when you understand what you're reading, you save time because you don't have to go back and read it again. And especially if you have to talk about it in class, write about it, do an assignment, or take a test, you really want to understand it so that you can show what you know. Okay, so the other reason, of course, is because it's going to save you time. And we're all busy. We need our time. And by annotating inside of our texts, we'll save ourselves time. Because when we go back to look for something that we need to take out or use or study again, we can find it by looking at the writing that we put in our book. Okay, so let's talk about different ways you can annotate and what to do. So first off, if you use a highlighter or you underline in your book, that's great, but really it's not enough because when you go back and study and look at the yellow highlighted parts or the underlines, it's not really telling you anything. So a better way to do it is to write words or symbols or something like that. So first thing you might want to write down are the questions that you have while you're reading. Different types of questions can be, why did that happen? You want to understand more about the story. Or maybe you're really confused. You say, wait, I don't understand what I just read. What was that? And then you go back and you read it again and you just still don't understand. Or maybe you do. But either way, you can show yourself that you were confused by writing a little question mark or even writing the question. And if it's a question about what's happening in the book, you write a question mark and write the question about what's happening in the story, okay? And I'll give you an example later. Another thing you can do is to predict what's happening. It's really important that we use this skill that we have of guessing what will happen next in a story. And we do that all the time, even when we just see people, right? We're predicting what will happen every day, all the time in the future. And also when we're reading stories or we're studying a textbook or something like that, we can make predictions and guesses about what will happen next. And when we do that, we are paying attention to what we are reading and paying attention to what we are thinking, and that's the goal. Another thing that you can write down in your book to annotate is when you're surprised or shocked about something. And you can use an exclamation point or you can just write it down. Write down what is making you feel surprised. You can underline what was surprising. And then on the side, you can write down why it was surprising. A really great thing to write down is when you can connect with what you're reading. So maybe you have a similar experience from your life or your friend's life or your family or some other story you know about, and you can connect it to what you're reading. That's a great way to use that active reading to pay attention and stay focused and understand better. So when you make a connection, you might want to write down on the side of what you underline and say, oh, this reminds me of the time I was on an airplane, my first time, or something like that. What I love to do is to write summaries at the end of each page or at the top or the bottom. So after I read one page, I stop and I just write one short sentence summarizing the whole page. And a summary is just when you say what something is about in a very, very, very short version. Okay? So if you read this whole page, you write one sentence saying what it's about. Another thing is when you're reading, you probably can see something in your brain, in your imagination. So you're visualizing, and that's really important. So when you visualize, you can also even draw pictures of the things you see to help you remember. And finally, of course, if you're reading and it's new information, like new vocabulary, it's a really great idea to circle, underline, or highlight words you don't know. Don't look them up yet, just circle them or something and keep reading, because usually you will be able to understand what the word means if you keep reading. But if you don't, then you can always go look in a dictionary later. So I'm going to show you an example of these different strategies I just talked about. Questioning, predicting, summarizing, making connections, visualizing, and pointing out new vocabulary right now. So if you look at the top of this page, it's called The Numbers Don't Lie. And at the very, very top, you can see I put in a rectangle a short summary of what this whole page is about. So when I go back, I can easily find what each part was about. So for example, this says, this page is about how good with the calculations the women computers were. So this tells me that this page is an explanation of the accuracy of the women computers at NACA. So if I keep reading, it says the numbers don't lie. Soon after becoming a mathematician with the supersonic pressure tunnel, Mary Jackson was given an assignment by her boss's boss's boss. And you can see I did an underline, I wrote lots of question marks, and on the side of that, I wrote down what that means. The reason why I underlined it and put question marks is because this type of use of apostrophes is really confusing for myself and for me. It's really confusing for me and for a lot of people. So I just wrote boss of boss of boss to remind me what it means. If I keep reading down, I'll see there's an area with a circle around double checking. That's what I do when I find new vocabulary words, so I can go back and check them later. And then here, I also wrote, like students when editing. So I made a connection here. What am I connecting with? I'll read that sentence. She did the work and delivered the finished assignment after double checking her results. So, and I wrote, like students when editing. So I'm connecting this sentence about the women who check their computer, who check their numbers again and again and again, and how that is like students who are writing and editing their grammar and their punctuation before they turn it into their class. If I keep reading, I see more circles. The word insisted is a new word. And if I read that sentence, at the end, I see an exclamation point, and I wrote the words brave to remind me of why I was surprised. So let me read it. He insisted that Mary's calculations were wrong. Mary Jackson respectfully stood by her work. Now, the reason why I put exclamation points here and the word brave is because this is a woman who was working with mostly all men, all white men, at a time in the 50s, the 40s and the 50s in the United States, when African American women especially were not used to working with men, or especially even white people, because of all the discriminatory laws going on. And Mary Jackson was an African American woman, and a white male had pointed out that she did something wrong, and she said, "No, I didn't." And that was really brave, because at that time, if that happened, usually, even if the African American woman was correct, even if she were correct, it wouldn't matter, because there was so much discrimination. So I said she's brave for doing that. If I keep reading, I see more circles, and I circled the word apologize, and I wrote question marks there. And I wrote, this was probably rare. The reason why I circled and wrote question marks there is because it confused me. I was confused about why this person in this part of the book apologized. So let me read what happened. When they realized the mistake, he apologized to her. So basically what happened was Mary Jackson was confident about her calculations and said she was right, and the white male engineer working with her said, "Oh yeah, you are right, I'm sorry." And that was probably not very common at that time. It actually was not common for a white male to apologize to an African American woman, especially when he was higher in a position at the job than she was. And he apologized to her, so I was very confused and shocked, and so I wrote that down. And it also made me happy that he did that. And then I wrote underline on the last sentence there. I wrote, it says, Mary's willingness to stand by her work earned her a reputation around the office as a smart and dedicated mathematician. So I underlined that part because for me, that was sort of the point of this page. It goes back to my summary. And remember, my summary is at the top of the page, and it says, this page is about how good with the calculations the women computers were. Mary Jackson was a woman computer, an African-American woman computer at NACA, which is now NASA. And she was so confident in her ability to make the calculations that she got a good reputation there at NASA for doing good work. And that's the whole point of this page and all these examples. So I underlined it. And then on the last paragraph, I at the last sentence, it says, there were very, very few red dots. Red dots meant error in the work that these computers did. And there were very, very few red dots. That means that they did good work. So I pointed that out. I wrote an arrow and I said they didn't make mistakes because I wanted to remember what that meant later on. Now, this is just one page example of a few simple annotations. I didn't do all of them. I actually don't have a prediction in here, but I have predictions in other parts of my annotations. I just didn't predict anything on this page. I could easily do that and say, that because of Mary Jackson's reputation, now she is going to be promoted at her job. That's a prediction. Maybe it'll be true, maybe it won't. It doesn't matter. The important thing is that I'm focused on what I'm reading. And then when I go back to study or something like that, I'll be able to easily remember what I was reading because of all the things that I wrote down. So I hope that this video helps you and that you're able to use this strategy and start reading for better understanding and saving yourself time. Thanks for watching.